Here are the cards that I'm going to be sharing with you how to make. You'll notice they all have the same color scheme, the same look, the same pattern, because I actually did one stamping and then I made my projects. And what I'm calling this is Custom Designer Series paper. We're actually going to kick it up a step and we are going to make it Custom Specialty Designer Series paper. And I'll share with you how easy it is. So you might be wondering, why are we making printed paper or patterned paper? If you are a card maker or crafter, you know sometimes you go looking for some kind of paper, some kind of feeling, and you're just not finding what you like. You already have a vision in your head. You kind of know the colors. If you're making a custom card for someone, you know what their favorite colors are. And you're not able to find what you like. I know that that happens a lot with me when I'm making my Stampin' Up! Cards. I will go to the pattern paper section of the catalog, and although there are beautiful papers in the catalog, there's actually a great selection of them. Starting on page 148, you know, you're gonna find all kinds of pattern papers in the catalog, but sometimes you just can't find what you're looking for. So let's make our own. You only need the basics, the stamps, the papers, the ink, and you're ready to get started. So let me share with you how I chose what I was going to use for my pattern paper. So my first step was to think about the elements that I wanted in my pattern paper. I wanted to have kind of an eclectic, so that's like a random array of different elements, kind of evoking the same kind of a theme. And one of the best stamp sets I found in the catalog, and let's see if I can find the page number for you. My favorite, one of my favorites, on page 124, there's this beautiful set called Tasteful Touches. So as you're looking through the elements, you're noticing they look kind of random. So there's a feather, a beautiful flower, and it's a distinctive flower, which means it has a lot of detail in this stamp. There's another element, like a design element, looks like scrolls, maybe flowers. There's some little squares, like splotchy vintage style squares. There's a spray of leaves, or a branch of leaves. And then you do have some great sentiments. So another one of those stamp sets that I love that has the art, and it also has the sentiments or the greetings. Makes a perfect combination. I know, Dixie, I'm in love with it. Dixie says she likes it. I love this one. Now, one of the crazy things about it, a lot of people look at the stamp set and say, why didn't they give us the die to cut out that feather? Why didn't they give us the die to cut out the flower? Well, when you look at this set, this bundle, it is a bundle. Besides the beautiful elements in the stamp set, the dies are amazing themselves. But what you're going to get is not dies to cut out the elements in the stamp set. You're going to get dies that cut out those sentiments. So marrying the two together, got my dies, I'm kind of thinking through. My next step was to consider my colors. So it being summer, I still wanted something bright. Those elements look kind of vintagey, kind of naturistic, but I wanted some bright, vibrant colors. So my first color that I picked, one of my favorite blues, that Pacific Point. So there's a bright Pacific Point. To balance that out, I went with another bold, vibrant color on the color spectrum, and that would be Calypso Coral. So those are my two vibrant colors, that Pacific Point and Calypso Coral. Then I wanted the opposite. I didn't want the vibrancy, I wanted the subtleness. I wanted to go with a subtle blue, so I chose the Pool Party. And I needed a subtle Calypso Coral, in which case I took out my Petal Pink. So now I've got subtles, and I have bold, vibrant colors. And you can see how I'm arranging them. I'm kind of arranging them with the elements that I'm going to be stamping out with. I did choose that flower stamp. I chose the spray of leaves, or like the inches, and I chose that beautiful flower, and then I chose that design element, those scrolls that are going to be a nice soft effect on the card. So now I'm kind of got set up. I've got my stamp set, I've got my colors. The next thing I'm going to be doing is getting my paper. So to stamp on, I just chose, let's see if I can get these out of the way. I just chose Whisper White. I mean, nothing better than Whisper White. And it stamps beautifully. Stampin' Up's paper has that nice smooth texture to it. And it's going to ink up and take the image nicely. And it's going to create a beautiful background paper. So let's get started. I've got what I did. Let's talk about that too. I took a 11-inch by 8.5-inch paper, and I trimmed it down to 4.5. So 4.5 across, and I kept it at the 11 inches. So I'm going to be working in one giant canvas, and I'm going to be trimming it down. So this is how I'm going to get multiple projects out of my one stamp session. So I'm going to start off with my bold Calypso Coral, and you'll remember on these ink pads we're just going to pull up, flip over, and then slide it over. And I always leave it almost like a 1/4 inch to the top. I don't like to open it completely. So I'm going to start off with my flower, and I'm going to bring that in, let's see, and I'm going to stamp multiples across the paper. So first of all, I'm making sure that I'm tapping and inking up nicely, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to kind of go across, and then I'm going to repeat down at the bottom as well with the same pattern. So, and I am going to ink up between stamps. So there we go, one flower, and I kind of vary the angle of the images, so some of them I might have tweaked just a tiny bit. So I've got 3 across. My next step is going to be, let's see if I can bring a little bit more into the camera view. My next step is going to be to come back and repeat at the bottom. So I'm going to kind of go in between my top layer. So coming down in here. So I've got actually 3 across and 3 down. And this is random. I am not measuring anything out. I'm not worried about balance of color or where I'm going to put certain things. It's all kind of random the way I'm choosing it. So I start off with my Calypso Coral. Now I'm going to go to my subtle element, that Pool Party, and I'm going to pick up that scrollish background. Looks very vintagey, kind of fading in and out. Pool Party again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink up and I'm going to come in between the flowers. So I'm going to start up at the top here, and overlapping is fine. And I'm going to kind of randomly come across here. Remember, I am not measuring. I'm not worried about the angles. It's just all kind of random coming in here. Just laying the color throughout. And you'll notice I didn't even put my stamp on the ink block straight. So I'm not worried about being precise. It's all random, just creating a pattern. And I'm going to come in with a little off the edge. And a little at the top. There we go. So far I've got, it's not looking, not looking beautiful yet. So I've just got some flowers and then that random background design. Now I'm going to come in with that bold Pacific Point feather. And I'm going to, again, kind of spread the color around. And I am also going to be varying the stamp. So some of them I might put facing upward. My next one I might put facing kind of like it's flowing down. And I like the way the curve follows the curve of the flower, so I'm going to bring that in there. Coming in down. Maybe a little bit more color in through here. So again, no precision, no measuring, just kind of bringing it in randomly. And I like the way I've got some bold color top, bottom, it's all around pattern. It's kind of looking a little bit better. I'm going to next come in with that petal pink branch. And I'm just going to fill in some of the areas that are white, bringing it in. Some of them might overlap. And every single inking, every single project is going to be unique. They are not going to come out the same. Just like no card ever comes out the same, even when it's the same person creating it. And I'm going to come in at the sides with just kind of peeking up or down in the paper. All right, so there you go. There's my stamping. I'm now going to push those stamps out of the way, and I'm going to leave my ink on the table. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in another tool. I'm going to bring in my sponges. So I have a sponge dedicated to each color. What I've done is just taken one of our large round sponges and I cut it into quarters, and I've got a little label on it so I know this is a blue. I'm going to kind of keep a blue on it, that way I don't have to wash them every time I use them. I know I'm going to be using a light pale blue, I'm going to use the vibrant pink, and I'm going to use the subtle pink. So there we go. And I'm going to come back in now and I'm going to add some more colors. Starting again, I'm going to go in with the Calypso Coral. I'm going to kind of start off the paper and then come in and just in circular motion put some color over the flowers. So I'm coming in off the paper, circular motion. I'm just going to bring in some color, and it kind of depends on whether or not you typically have a heavy hand or whether you are just really gentle on here. I don't want too much color on it, but I do want to get some nice coverage. So it's kind of an in-between, no right or wrong. Again, everybody's is going to come out differently. So I'm bringing in the color, the Calypso Coral, same color that I stamped the flower with, right over. So now it's sort of shaping up and I'm liking what's going on here. What do you think? All right, I'm going to come over to the pool party and bring that color in. And this is, of course, one of the subtles. I'm going to come in and I'm going over the elements that have that color ink already. So pretty much the tone on tone. And I'm coming in with circular motions all the way around. Love this stamp set. And by the way, this stamp set, this bundle, actually has coordinating paper. Nothing like this. The coordinating paper on this bundle is that woodsy architectural style with the brick, the marble, beautiful paper, but nothing like this. So let's see. Almost done here with the pool party. And it's starting to really shape up. What do you think? This is a great way to customize your cards. And we're actually going to be able to produce a set of cards in just a very small amount of time. So I've done the pool party. I'm going to come in next with my petal pink, and I am going to go right over those branches that I did earlier. Let's see. Right in here. I just kind of do a tap tap on the ink pad, pick up a little bit of the color, and you're going to see there's just a subtle difference between the petal pink and the Calypso Coral now. That Calypso Coral, it's brighter, it's more vibrant. The petal pink is really subtle. And again, the width of this paper was 4.5, and it's 11 inches long. It's going to give us enough to produce at least 3 cards. You could actually do more depending on your template for your cards. All right, So I've got my stamped images, I've got the sponging going on, and because that Pacific point is so vibrant, I'm not going to come over it the same way I did with the other colors. I'm going to leave it at that. So here's already beautiful pattern paper, which would make a really nice background for your card. But we're going to step it up. Barbara says it looks beautiful. Thank you, Barb. We are going to step it up and make it a specialty pattern paper or specialty designer series paper. So what makes it specialty? Just like the specialty papers in the catalog that have the glimmer, the gold foil, the diamond effect, that's what we're going to do. We are going to pump up this pattern paper with a couple of extra tools and supplies. So here's what I'm bringing in. I am going to bring in my shimmery white embossing paste, and to spread that I need some of the palette knives. They come in a trio. They kind of look like those little frosting spreaders. So I've got that, and I often use the silicone mat to do this on. Today, because I've got such a large canvas here, I'm not going to be using that, but notice how I have protected my huge paper. That's because when it gets messy, I'm just going to want to fold it up and toss it away. So I've got my embossing paste, I've got my knife, and all I need now is a stencil. So you might know in the catalog there is a selection of stencils, and they're reasonably priced. But again, it's not quite what I wanted. So I'm going to make my own. And here's how I've done it. I've taken a die, and I borrowed a die from the Poppy Moments. So when you look inside these dies, there is a special die that creates a negative. The other dies are going to cut out flowers. This one's going to cut into the paper. So this die, and it is a group of flowers with thin outlines on them, and that's exactly what I want for my stencil. So what I did, I took a piece of cardstock, I went over to the Big Shot, I cranked it out, and earlier I did it on black, and you can see I did it 2 times here. One of the things I noticed was a little bit of the black came off, and there's a particular reason I got a little bit of runoff on the color. So what I've decided to do for today, or for right now, I've just taken white cardstock, and this is the thick cardstock. So it's heavyweight cardstock, still has that die cut into it, and the reason that mine took off a little bit of the black coloring onto my pattern paper is because my embossing paste is actually old. I think I've had it, I want to say, over a year. When you open it up, you should leave all of the layers on the jar so that when you close it up, you can take care of it and it will last longer. So it had the lid cover, it's got a little foamy cover, and then last it's got that foil cover. And so you can kind of see how mine's messy. When I first opened the jar, I kind of tore into it. I should have been a little bit more precise, a little bit more strategic about how I was dealing with that foil, because it wasn't able to seal properly, and it kind of dried out. So I tried to rejuvenate it, and it actually worked. Problem was I probably added too much liquid to it. So it's more of a runny consistency than the frosty consistency that you should have. But it worked. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy that I didn't have to chuck this jar. You can see I've got very little left, which means that I have been using my embossing paste. It hasn't just been sitting there. It's been a while since I opened it, probably a year. Nonetheless, it has seen a lot of projects. So what I'm going to do next, now I'm going to take that stencil that I created, I'm going to lay it right atop my pattern paper, and because I did 3 of them, I only need to lay it down once and I'll get some good coverage all over. I've got a supply of the shimmery paste. I put it on the back side so I can just kind of set it down, and spread it just like you would frosting, just on a cake. You don't want it too thick. You want to make sure that your stencil stays in place. So I'm just holding it down with one hand as I frost with the other. And I'm trying to take off any excess, trying to make sure that it gets into all those cuts. And this is going to add that extra to your pattern paper. I mean, who doesn't like shimmery? Who doesn't like the gold and all the flash? And the cutout is actually kind of subtle, so it's not going to be bold because we've already got some boldness going on with the pattern. There we go. So I'm just going to come right in. I'm going to take off as much as I can, leaving just a thin layer of the embossing paste. And again, if you were using a smaller paper, you might want to lay down that silicone mat so that you don't get your tabletop ruined. I'm going to gently pull away. So just kind of lifting that up. It's got a beautiful effect. I don't know how much the camera is going to be able to pick up. Really nice, subtle effect. I've got another half over here that I'm going to do, so I'm going to kind of set that down. And I'm going to try and be gentle over here on the side here where I'm kind of layering. And I'm going to repeat. Just going to bring out another supply of embossing paste. And I'm kind of scraping down at the bottom. So what I would do to keep the paste intact is once you seal it up and you close the lid on it nicely, store it upside down. And I think of my fruits that I do that with. Whenever I get strawberries, I always cut them up, put them in a bowl, put a little paper towel in them, and toss them in the fridge in a container. And I actually have that container upside down. So I would do the same with the embossing paste. That way the moisture is going to stay with the paste instead of the paste sitting there and drying out. All right, so one more time. There we go. I've got a little spot. There we go. And I am now ready to remove my stencil, and I'm going to be really careful pulling up. There we go. Now, you could go ahead and heat dry it, or just let it sit overnight, either way. But you want it to dry out before you start working with it, obviously. Otherwise it's going to make your project really messy. The paper might bend a little bit because of the moisture, but you'll be able to kind of secure it down using your glues. And so you have a nice half sheet of specialty designer series paper. What do you think? So how about we make it into some projects next? Let me bring in one that I made earlier today that's already dry. I'm going to put this one aside so it dries. There's my project. You can see I still have the same color, same stamps. I pretty much mimicked this afternoon what I did earlier. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start actually creating my cards. So I am making standard size cards. I'm going to start off with one that is just whisper white, and I have cut it vertically and I have scored it. Now I just need to go ahead and burnish that down. Corner to corner, make sure you use your bone folder. There we go. So there's my card base, just whisper white. Sandy says, way cool. Thank you, Sandy. I'm really enjoying this technique, and it's going to help me pump out a lot of the cards that I need to get out. So now I've got a card, or sorry, a paper. The width is 4.5, so I'm going to trim this down to 3 1/4. I'm going to bring in my mini trimmer. Don't forget, I'm giving one of these away this week. Just share the video and you're entered into the drawing to win. I'm going to come in and I'm going to trim it down to 3 1/4. So just coming in and cutting that down. There we go. So I've got my pattern paper. It is the focal point of the card, no doubt. All I'm going to do is add some dimensionals and pop that up onto the nice white base. Oh, you can see this was a goof up one, so I actually turned my paper over and started again. Kind of the nice thing about paper having two sides. So if you goof up again, then you're going to have to get a new sheet, but no point in tossing one little goof up away. So Dixie says, thanks for showing another tool or product to use. This paste is really cool, Dixie. Take it a step further and add a couple of drops of the re-inker, and then you have embossing paste any color you like. So I could have added a drop or two of Pool Party and made a beautiful light pale blue shimmery paste. And the sky's the limit. Use any color you like. Shimmery white is the way to go. I can't say about the white. I don't use the white very often. I like that sparkle in it. So there we go. I've added that, and you can see I'm just kind of putting like an equal border all the way around. So my sentiment is going to come from the same stamp set, a very sweet sentiment, and I've used one of the dies from the bundle that says, "The good things in life are better with you." This is another one of those cool sentiments that has the script font and the sans serif font, and it just is so simple. I added it on one of the labels in Calypso Coral just to bring out that color. All I'm going to do is pop a dimensional on one side of it, and on the other side, because the background paper is already popped up on dimensionals, what I'm going to do is glue dot it. That way it is flat and we don't get dimensional on top of dimensional. So I'm just going to add a couple of glue dots here. I'm going to be generous because I've got that embossing paste in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. The sentiment was heat embossed, so I just stamped it in Versamark and I added the white embossing paste. And I'm just going to add that on. I'm going to slide it all the way to the edge. And there you go. First card. Very simple, but the star of the card is that background paper with that shimmery effect. You can kind of see when I hold it up at the angle. I love it. So I love all the eclectic elements in this stamp set. It's a really cool bundle. So there's card number one, and remember we used only 3 1/4 of our pattern paper. I'm going to bring that in for the next card. Let's finish this off with a little bit more shimmer. So what I'm using are the Holiday Rhinestone Basic Jewels. I love this set because you have all these different colors of jewels in there. You have a deep sapphire blue. I don't know if that's Pacific Point. You have the lighter, like either the Pool Party or the Seaside Spray color. You have a dark vibrant green, you have a deep red, and a golden color. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just make this really basic. I'm going to take the smaller light blue jewels, and I'm just going to make a little trio in a line. So starting in the center, and I have a tiny bit of frosting or embossing paste on my nail. This is a messy project, so I'm going to have to go wash up afterward. Now I'm going to take a second jewel and I'm going to just line it up horizontally, same way, and I'm not pushing down just yet because I want to make sure that they're in a line the way I want them. So I just need to kind of get it onto the paper, and I'll be able to push it over just a tiny bit. And another one to the left. So now I kind of want to line those up a little bit better. And I could have got my Pick a tool and made it behave. There we go. And show these rhinestones. Who's the boss? There we go. A nice little trio of rhinestones. There you go. I love this card. I love the shimmer in the background, and I love just the basic shimmer underneath the sentiment. There we go. So I'm going to bring back in my paper, And this next card I'm going to put on the Vibrant Pacific Point. And I'm going to add a matting. I'm going to bring in both of those bold, vibrant colors, the Calypso Coral mounted onto the Pacific Point. There's our pattern paper. And again, a sentiment from the stamp set and using one of the dies from the stamp set. So what I've done, I've got my Pacific Point card base, and I'm going to fold that down into my 5.5 by 4 1/4 card base. Use my bone folder. I am going to be mounting my pattern paper onto that Calypso Coral. So my Calypso Coral, here's what I'm going to show you. Okay, so here's my mat to about, let's see, I think I'm going to do it on this side. I needed about 3 1/8. I just want a tiny border. Trying to reconnect. I'm having gippy Wi-Fi lately, even though we've come and we've updated and upgraded. All right, here we go. 3 1/8, and let's see how that looks on my mat. So I've got just the tiniest border, but I need to trim a little bit off of the height. And I'm going to come back in and I'm going to trim that down just the tiniest bit. I'm not even measuring perfectly. I'm going to snip off, I think, about 1/4 inch. And let's see how that looks, if that's enough. I think it's not seeing the dimensionals. So just going to flip that over, add some dimensionals on the back. There we go. And let's see. The dimensional. There we go. And I'm going to flip that right into position, about equal border all the way around. And I'm going to add that sentiment that was cut from the mat. Again, it was stamped in Versamark, then heat embossed, and I'm going to do the same trick I did on the other card. Remember, I put the dimensionals only to one side. And I think I'm going to take just a small snippet of my border dimensionals. So I just want a little tiny piece on the end. And then of course the other side is going to be the glue dots. So I've got that into position to secure over the area that's already got dimensionals on it. So just putting this down right in place. We are now going to add our sparkle, add that pop of pizzazz. And I'm just going to take, again, the same color of rhinestones. I'm going to get one of the bigger ones and bring it down right underneath special. I'm going to take the next size down and bring it over to that nice scrollish background stamp. And one more, popping it up. I always like to put the rhinestones in 3s. Balances it out nicely. So now we've got our second card. Same beautiful specialty designer series paper, custom made, and we're going to make yet another card. We still have some of our specialty paper left. This card again is going to be on Pacific Point, same cut with the top folding score. Put that into position. Emboss it, no sorry, burnish it. And this one I'm going to mount a couple times. I'm going to put a white background to make it pop a little bit more. And again, there's my Calypso Coral mat, and you can see that's where I cut one of my sentiments. And next I just need to trim out a small piece of this designer series paper that we created. And I think this mat is the same as the other. It should be 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, I believe. Yep. 3 1/4, 4 1/4. So I'm going to need to trim some of my designer series paper, and I think I want this area with more of the sparkle. So I'm going to trim from here, and I'm going to cut it down to 3 1/8, just like we did on the previous card. And I just need to trim a little bit off the height. So I'm going to bring it down to just about 1/4 inch. And let's see how that turns out. There we go. I like it. And again, this is going to be mounted flat adhesive onto the mat. Just a tiny bit of liquid glue. Here we go. All right, and then next, this is going to be dimensionaled onto the white, so it kind of makes the pattern paper pop a little bit more with that white background. And you can see that die cut in the middle does not bother the mat. So we didn't have to cut any extra paper to get our dies. And I'm going to put this right in the middle, equal border all the way around. And then this is going to go onto the Pacific Point with flat adhesive. So just my liquid glue. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I've got that. I love the liquid glue. It's so forgiving. I can kind of swoosh it over a tiny bit if it's not exactly where I want it to be. There we go. All the way around. And my last step is going to be to add the sentiment. And I'm going with the same stamp set. And I've done the hello. And what I did, because you'll notice that the stamp actually says just saying hello. So all I did was mask some of this before I stamped down with Versamark. And then I used white embossing powder, and I used one of the dies from the same die set that coordinates with this bundle. So this one is going to be, let's see, I think I'm going to pop this up with a little bit of dimensionals. I'm going to grab my mini dimensionals and pop this up. There we go, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball where I want this. I want it just over that beautiful Pacific Point feather. And last step, I'm going to add that pizzazz with some rhinestones. So we're going to bring one in right below. Let's see, let's bring it in right underneath the hello. I'm going to get one of the next smaller ones, and I'm going to pop this over, let's see, right around there. Oh, not cooperating, it's hanging on my finger. Let's see if I can get it on there. And then last, one more. And I'm going to bring it up to the flower. There we go. Now you will see I still have one tiny sliver, and what could you do with that? You know, a lot of times you have a card, you just need a tiny bit. It could easily go across and then put another layer up on here. So I wouldn't necessarily toss it. You could still make something out of it, make a nice just one panel on the card with it. So there we go. There's my 3 cards I created with my custom made specialty designing paper using the Tasteful Touches stamp set, the coordinating dies, and of course the beautiful color scheme that I chose. So I've got some nice cards ready to go out. Good thing, because I'm way behind on my card sending. That's on the to-do list. So hard to keep up with everything. All right, guys, What do you think? Are you going to give this custom designer series paper a crack? I think you're going to love it. There's no right or wrong to it. It's a little bit messy, but you can get very creative with your choices. The stamp sets that you choose, the color scheme that you choose are going to create that